We're going to continue in Proverbs 21. This morning we got through about 14 verses. We didn't finish 21, but we got a good chunk of it down. So that's why you probably have so many handouts in front of you, is because I was in between part 1 and part 2. So that's why the paperwork. But we're going to start with part 1. We're going to start on verse 10. And for those that are new, we normally do this one verse at a time. We'll kind of discuss it, chew on it, see how we can apply it to our lives to do His will and help His kingdom come and give us wisdom in our decisions. Because if you're like me, you've made some decisions in the past that you're not very proud of. So I want to try to do that better going forward. So who would like to read verse 10?
The soul of the wicked desires evil. His neighbor finds no favor in his eyes.
So we've had several verses on this same topic, but the evil, they've got it in their heart. That's why it's so important to check your heart, right? So if your heart is for righteousness, then your mouth and your actions are going to do the same. If your heart is for evil, then that's all you're going to desire. And that's what this verse is saying. Even his neighbor finds no favor in his eyes. So if they're evil, they're bent on evil. Anything they have is going to be for evil purposes. Their heart won't be pure. So they may come to you with false humility or false love or other stuff, but they always got a motivation. You know the type of people that I'm sure you've had to deal with them in life.
Oh, yeah.
So that comes to the next question, is how do you deal with this type of person? Whether you're your neighbor or they're at work, how do you deal with someone that's like this?
You set boundaries.
Boundaries, I think that's important. Expectations, right? So you shouldn't I think of it also as a lot of the times people will react because they're hurt inside. There's something broken. And it's easy for us when someone's being venomous towards us to be in the flesh and just throw the venom back. But if you pause for a second and you ask yourself, why is this person being that way? A lot of times you can ask that question, like, are you having a rough day? What's happened today? Or, and it may catch them off guard, right? Because a lot of times they're expecting the fight. That's why they do it a lot of times.
I got a story that there's a person from church that had borrowed $100 from me a few months ago. And I called them and asked for it back, and they said, take it up with Jesus, pray about it. And I was like, she was like wanting me to and I didn't know. I was just like, I just kind of, I knew that wasn't going to get me anywhere. And I still haven't been paid back. But she said some pretty mean things to me, hung up on me about, so whenever I got my back pain, I took out the money to do something with it. And she's like, oh, can I get that? And I gave it to her. And then, a couple of weeks later, she was just being so nasty to me just to get me to do the same to her, and I didn't at all, I wanted to. I wanted to say a whole bunch of negative stuff to her, but I didn't. Think that maybe if I handled like that, she would still pay me back, but she didn't.
Yeah, we kind of talked about that on the co-signing, right? A lot of times it's better to do a gift than a loan,
Right.
Just because, you're...
You give without expecting it back.
Right, because then the relationships aren't broken, and it's almost easier, And then if you give it as a gift, and then the person feels really blessed, then they'll come back a lot of times and give you a gift card or thank you, and then you'll kind of get a proof of their heart, or they may never say anything, and then that's your answer, right? Right, so, okay, let's go on to 11 and 12. Who'd like to read?
scoffer is punished, the simple is made wise. But when the wise is instructed, he receives knowledge. The righteous God wisely considers the house of the wicked, overthrowing the wicked for the wickedness.
So this is the basic way of explaining this is there's two types of people. There's the type of people that have to touch the stove, and then there's the type that can watch people get burned and say, I'm not going to do that, right? And hopefully we're the latter, right? So hopefully as you get gray hair like I have, you've touched the stove enough that you now can see it coming, and you can act accordingly, and you can ask for wisdom, like it says here, you know, and you can receive knowledge, because receiving knowledge in and of itself takes some humility, right? Because you can't teach somebody that knows it all. So if you have a know-it-all kind of attitude, then you're not going to be able to receive that knowledge or apply it. You're going to have to learn the hard way. And that's what this is saying. And then the overthrowing for the wickedness. And we'll have some other examples of this, but the idea here is do you learn from your mistakes? So what do y'all do when you're in a trial, when things are going bad? How does your prayer life, what do you do? Do you pray? How's that sound?
I used to do drugs and alcohol when I was
Yeah.
mad. Now, I just think about, the sermon where Pastor Lynn was talking about worrying, is it sin basically because you're not trusting God?
Mm-hmm.
So coming to church and, learning the Bible and just thinking about the past sermons that he spoke about has helped me out without having to turn and self-medicate with drugs and alcohol.
That's absolutely right. I like to try to think and pray like, God, don't let me go through the desert for 40 years. Help me learn what I need to learn from this experience. Because I know this happened for a reason. I don't know the reason. I can't explain why I'm here and why this hurts like heck and why all this happened. But I know you want this is going to be used for your glory. So help me learn the first time so I don't have to march around the desert again and again and again or repeat the same mistake. That's how my prayers go on that topic. So let's go on to verse 13. Who would like to read?
Whoever shuts his ears to the cry of the poor will also cry himself and not be heard.
Okay, so we had a lot of the poor in Proverbs here and how to deal with them. And this is just reminding us. And in the commentary, Life Application Bible used the story of Lazarus and the rich man, if y'all remember that story, right? So just as a review, this is not the Lazarus that Jesus rose. This is a prior Lazarus, but Lazarus was a beggar, and he sat outside this rich man's gates, hoping for the crumbs from his table, okay, as the scripture says, and yet the rich man never gave him anything. And when he died, and I'm paraphrasing as I can recall, but the angels came and got the poor man, Lazarus, and lifted him up, even though he didn't get a proper burial and he was thrown out with like the trash. They would throw the trash outside of the city. And the angels came and got him, whereas the rich man was sent to Sheol, to Hades, which is the prior thing before hell. And then in hell, there's this interesting passage in the story, because the rich man asks Abraham, he says, Abraham, can you not just get Lazarus to come and bring me a cup of water? You know?
Yeah, he could see him. He could see through the veil.
He could see through the veil.
Walking.
He could see through him, and then the response was, do you remember the response?
No. Once you're here, there's nothing more you can do. And then he begged for the opportunity to tell his friends and family, and he's like, no. Basically, once you're here, you're here.
Yeah, there was two things. You're absolutely right. So one is that, you know, first off, there's a fixed divider between the two, so they couldn't go back and forth. And then second off, he said, well, can you raise him from the dead so he could warn my brothers and all that? And then he said, even if someone was raised from the dead, they wouldn't believe and turn. Isn't that prophetic, right? We have Jesus and we have all these people to this day that don't believe. Yet we have factual evidence of an empty tomb and over 100 witnesses and all of this, yet they don't believe, even though he was raised. So the point here is we need to be sympathetic to the poor, but we have to do it in a smart way. We need to not enable the poor, but if they're hungry, feed them. That's what Jesus said. If they're thirsty, give them water. He didn't say give them cash so they can continue their addiction, right? So we have to be careful and we have to be smart on that. The way I usually do that is when I see them, I'll try to offer to buy them a meal or something like that. Or I go downtown, I'll have protein bars or something in my bag and I'll offer them. And you'll know real quick where their heart is, because they'll either say, thank you, I was hungry, or they'll say, no thank you, can I just get the cash? You know, and then you know, right? You know that you know. And then regardless if they do take the food, then I'll say, okay, can I pray for you? And I say, I didn't give you, and then they try to thank me, I say, no, I didn't give you, this was Jesus through me, right? Okay, 14.
Gift in secret pacifies anger, and a bribe behind the back, strong wrath.
Okay, so once again, this is why we call Proverbs wisdom literature. It's different than the red letters in the Gospels when Jesus is talking. This is an 80% truth, and what this is telling you, it's not telling you that bribery is good, but he's telling you that bribery does work, and it's what you're dealing with in this world. And if you've seen any of the Epstein files, you know that bribery and blackmail is very apparent in this earth, so this is very true. But he's also saying that a gift will pacify anger. So there's some discernment in here. Obviously, you don't want to do things that are evil like bribery, but think of the book of Esther. You remember the book of Esther? When she went in, she could be killed if the king didn't hand out his scepter, right? So she tried to pray and determine an hour when she would have favor. Well, prior to that, she offered to do a meal and invite them, right? So that was kind of a gift. She was softening things up, right? That was wise. It wasn't evil, but it was wise, right? So we're supposed to be wise. We're supposed to be observant in things. You don't need to go in like a bull in a china closet. Ask some questions. Try to understand if the person's heart is pure. If you're going into a difficult situation, then, you know, the old saying with the gospel is barbecue first, right? Don't lead with that. You know, barbecue first. Have some conversations. Try to let them know that you actually care about them before you're preaching at them.
Right.
Does that make sense?
100%.
Okay. Let's go on to 15 and 16.
It is a joy for the just to do justice, but destruction will come to the workers of
Iniquity.
iniquity. A man who wanders from the way of understanding will rest in the assembly of the dead.
Okay. Here's the thing is, and I think a lot of people get this wrong, but like when you read the book of Revelation, for instance, it's full of judgment. But there's two sides, right? So God is love and he's also justice. So when you're when you want the presence of God to be thick in your life, he can't be thick in your life if he's not judging the evil. Does that make sense? You can't have a foot in one camp and another and a foot here. You can't just play church and say, okay, God, I'm going to give you Sundays. And then the other 6 days of the week, I'm going to live like, I want to live. But on Sundays, you get to drive. God doesn't work that way, right? So if you want the power, the joy, the peace, the fruits of the Spirit of God, you've got to let him rule. And that means he's going to judge some evil in your life. And he's got to judge evil in our world too. And I think, there's two ways of looking at things. As we're talking right now, there's bombs flying, there's people dying, there's a lot of, quote, tribulation. But he said there will be tribulation. So, in my opinion, there's two ways of looking at this. My opinion is I see the tribulation, but I also see a whole spirit of revival. And I see the church getting more spirit filled. I see the church being more active and more relevant than they have in the past. And think about it, he's also judging the church. Judgment always starts in the house of the Lord. How many pastors have we seen fall in the last year? Major pastors falling, right? Because he's judging. So I think this is a good thing, right? You can look at it as a bad thing, or you can look at it as a good thing. The good thing is if he's judging evil, then we can have more of his presence here, okay? But if you're hanging on to evil, then all you're going to see is judgment. And then what about this small drift? Where have y'all seen this in your life where you make a small drift, you make compromises, and then you kind of start drifting, and then all of a sudden you see your relationship with the Lord different.
Yep.
And you wonder, where did you go, Lord? Have y'all done that, or is it just me?
I understand what you're saying, yeah. I'm sure we've all done it. Especially like when you first get into it and you think, it's like when the seed gets planted, depending on what it falls on, that's a good time for that wandering to happen. That's where most of it in my life has happened. Is when
Even as a Christian, you can get complacent, right?
Yeah, you get comfortable.
You get comfortable, you get complacent, you say, well, I've already read the Bible, I've done that. I've had people say, church is like ice cream. If you get too much of it, just kind of upsets your stomach. There are people like that, right? Or you can let the negativity, like somebody not paying you back $100 start to burn, and the devil can use that, right? And he could have used that, and you could have agreed with him, and you could have said, oh, I'm not going back to church. All the church people are like that. And you could have, quote, church hurt. We have a lot of people out there that have church hurt. Because they go to church and they expect the people to be great. And guess what? The people are the same out there as they are here. It's just the people here hopefully know when they're wrong and they're working on it.
Right.
It's a hospital, right? What did Jesus say? I didn't come for the righteous, but to save the sinners.
The sick.
And the sick. Right. Okay, 17.
He who loves pleasure will be a poor man. He who loves wine and oil will not be rich.
Okay, we have a incredibly materialistic society, and people are not happy with what they have. Contentment, right? As Paul said, right? I've been with and I've been without, and I've been starving and I've had plenty, and I've learned to be content regardless. And this speaks to this, right? So if you have to have all of these nice things, then it's going to cost you, right? So we have to balance that. We have to be able to be stewards of not only the spiritual, but also the financial here. He's not talking about wine and pleasure as an evil thing. He's talking about the imbalance of wine and pleasure. Do you understand what I mean? So when we're looking at this, it takes wisdom, and he's uniquely qualified because if you know about Solomon, he was the richest person on earth. And he wrote this book later in life after being humbled, right? Because he had, 700 concubines and 300 wives, and he did more drugs than anybody, and he tried everything. All you have to do is read the book of Ecclesiastes. He tried everything seeking for joy, and he found out it was all vanity. It was all meaningless, right? So now he's writing this back. So based on this, I came up with, Google supplied this for me, but the top 5 discretionary expenses that get people in trouble, okay? The top 5 discretionary expenses that keep people poor and are not wise. And it's not that you shouldn't do any of these things, it's that they have to be in proper proportion, right? So the top 5, number 1 is dining out or takeout. Like how many people, don't cook at all or do Uber Eats, and it keeps them poor, right? And then luxury or brand name items. Like you won't buy the store brand. You have to have only the top notch, or you have to have the Louis Vuitton bag instead of a regular bag, right?
Bring that on the job site.
Yeah, and entertainment expenses, like you have to go see the latest concert. I don't know if you've seen what concert tickets cost now, but they're outrageous, right? Gambling, and gambling now, especially on the phones, has just become huge. And then impulse purchases, retail therapy. I'm depressed, so I'm gonna go buy something.
Right.
You get that little endorphin thing, and you're trying to, it's no different than what you said before, when you get depressed and you go do drugs or alcohol. Some people they don't do that, but they actually just do purchases. They go to Amazon or go shopping and to cure their thing, and most of them are not frugal about it. They don't go to the thrift store to go shopping to get out, or they do it on the other end,
My
right?
cousin has that problem.
Yes. So this is just a tip for living. Once again, things have to be in proportion. We have to be stewards, not only of the spiritual, but also of the financial, okay, and of our health and all areas, right? 7 mountains, if you will. We should be stewards in all. Okay, I think we're on 18, right? So we're now to the second handout. I gave you 2 handouts, so. Somebody want to read 18?
The wicked shall be a ransom for the righteous, and the unfaithful for the upright.
Okay. I'll read McGee here. I thought his was good. Justice demands punishment of the guilty in order that the guiltless may be delivered. But by the grace of God, Jesus Christ, the righteous, became a ransom for the wicked. He is the upright. You and I are the transgressors. So that's taking the spiritual thing, but in the reality too, God will intervene for the righteous. He just doesn't do it on our time frame. I wish he would, right? We all wish he would, but he does it on his time frame because he's got a lot bigger plans than ours. But we are kind of seeing it, and he can use all the tools on the board, right? So, like, not to get geopolitical, but let's just speak of Iran. They have the fastest growing Christian population, and the Christians were getting murdered there. And the people that murdered them just got bombed out of oblivion. The Ayatollah and all of them, and his sons, all that. I see a lot of problems on that war, but God can still work through even all the problems, is what I'm trying to say. Because I'm not sure there's a good side to be on in this war right now. But nonetheless, even in the bad, God can use it for good, right? So that's what I'm trying to say. And I guess my question is how might God protect the upright by allowing consequences to fall where they belong, right? So sometimes we don't see. He puts you through that a lot of times to strengthen your faith. You probably have gone through a trial, a period in your life that you were doing the right thing and you were treated unfairly for it, right? But if you live long enough and you look back on it, then you'll see that you actually got blessings and you grew through that process. It doesn't feel good at the time. Never feels good at the time. Right. Okay, 21:19.
Better to dwell in the wilderness.
Okay, we had, this is almost like our first verse when we started this chapter, I think, or one of them, where it was talking about dwelling on the corner of a roof, then inside the house with the cantankerous woman, or however they said it. So here we have another one. The wilderness here is a reference to the desert, okay? So he's being pretty clear on his language, like it's better to be in the desert than to be in the house with her. Now, before we get all high and mighty on the her here, we have to always ask the question of why. So why is the lady contentious and angry? What did Paul tell us about marriage and the role of the man? Lynn just taught.
Love your wife
As Christ loved the church and gave himself for it, right? So if you're loving your wife that way, then chances are she's not going to be contentious and angry. But if you're not, then she might be contentious and angry.
It's kind of expected.
Kind of a consequence, kind of sowing and reaping. Now, things happen, sometimes, maybe you got into a relationship and you didn't pray about it and you weren't equally yoked, and there's consequences with that, right? Even when you're trying to love the other person. But, in God's design of the covenant relationship, it's supposed to work that way. We've talked about this before. If you love her like Christ loved the church, then it's not going to be a problem for her to submit to your authority when needed, because you're gonna love her and you're gonna give her lots of authority on a lot of things, and you're only gonna put your foot down on important things, right? Okay. In your relationships this week, what is the one thing you can do to calm and be a peacemaker?
Self-control.
Self-control.
Listen to them speak.
What?
Listen when you speak.
Yeah, that's a good one. Anything else?
Communications and this, like I said, pretty much what
Yeah. Chris, who I used to teach with, always had the saying of seek understanding before reaction. So when you wanna go, you blankety blank, and you wanna have all this fire out of your mouth, instead ask a question. Go, something like, okay, maybe I took that the wrong way. What did you mean by that? Or did you really intend to hurt my feelings? Or why did you react that way? Or why did you address it this way? And then you might be able to get to the root of the issue, and sometimes it's just a miscommunication. It's just taken wrong, and then next thing you know, you're all alarming up and it's guns ablaze.
Well, it's terrible to have like a serious conversation through text. You can't really see like the emotions from the person. So that's definitely what you said, seek understanding before reaction, and definitely if it's in a text message situation.
Oh, yeah.
Think about it every which way it could possibly be, and try not to pick the worst one and have a shape. Interpret it.
Yeah. I mean, we've probably all seen those funny texts where they get the grammar wrong or one word spelled wrong and it means something totally different than what was actually intended, So, okay. Let's go on to verse 20.
There is a desirable treasure in oil in the dwelling of the wise, but a foolish man squanders it.
Okay, this kind of talks about what we talked about before, is God will give you things, but He expects you to be stewards of them. If you come on Wednesday nights, we've been teaching on the talents, the parable of the talents, right? The talents were worth, in real dollars today, each talent was about 90-something thousand dollars. Okay, best we can tell. So when in the parable the master went away and he gave the talents according to their abilities. One talent, two talents, another 5 talents. And he expected a return on that investment, right? That was meant for them to go start a business, to trade, to do things, to expand, the vineyard, whatever it was. He wanted a return on that. Yet one of them went and buried it, right? The other 2 actually used it, and they were able to essentially double their money. But the one that buried it, the owner came back and said, why didn't you at least put it in the bank for interest? So in the example in the handout that I made for Wednesday, even though I wasn't here to teach it, we used inflation. And if you assume that he's gone for 1 generation, which is in Matthew 24, that was 40 years. 40 years, inflation alone would have made the value of that talent lose 2/3 of its value. So by burying it, he would have lost 2/3 just on inflation. So the other way, of course, we look at this and how to apply it is, what are we doing with the gifts that God gave us? Because we all have different gifts, we have different abilities, we've all been blessed, but they're all for His kingdom. So how are you using that gift? And if you're burying it, it's not good. A lot of us want the blessings, but then we're not responsible with them. There's another saying about being a cul-de-sac Christian, right? You don't want to be a cul-de-sac Christian, meaning that if God blesses you, the blessing needs to go through the street, not dead end at you, right? So if you don't pass that blessing through your hands, at least part of it, then God's not going to count you accountable, and it's going to be harder for him to trust you with things.
The notes in here on mine, it says the wise one has precious treasures and oil in his dwelling, but the fool spends everything he gets.
Yes. Very true. We have to plan for rainy days.
Right.
We all know the people that, the truck breaks down, the air conditioner goes out, and they've not put anything back. And then they end up, if they're lucky, getting a credit card, but then they have credit card debt at 20-something%, which we know, the borrower is the lender, the slave to the lender, right? So we know that's not a good thing. So we're supposed to be good stewards. Tithe some, save some. Okay, 21.
He who follows righteousness and mercy finds life, righteousness, and honor.
So, Believer's Bible Commentary put it here is that if you pursue righteousness and mercy, you get more than you bargained for. You get honor and life. Right? Because think of the opposite. If you're not pursuing righteousness, then you're going to sow that, and you're going to get that reward, which is death and consequences. But if you sow righteousness and mercy, then the same mercy that you give to others will be given unto you, right? The same evil that you give to others is going to be given unto you, right? Jesus is going to have a day, we're all going to meet Jesus one day, and we're going to have to recompense. We're going to have an account for our words and our actions. And luckily, if you're covered by the blood, then you know the outcome of that. But in the Bema Seat judgment, there are rewards in heaven. So yes, if you believe in Christ and you truly believe and you've been born again, then your destination is sure. But your rewards are based on how you're a steward. And, you have to choose wisely, right? Do you want your rewards here in the now, or do you want them where you can enjoy them for eternity? Okay. Any thoughts on that before we go into 22? Okay, let's go on to 22.
Wise man scales the city of the mighty and brings down the trusted stronghold.
Okay, so to me this speaks to spiritual warfare, because we're talking about a city and a stronghold. We just went through Ephesians 6 recently on Sunday morning. So this is talking about the spiritual realm. So there are tons of verses in there that say one, and for instance, says that the Lord will put the enemies under our feet, meaning that they can be under our feet. So we have authority through Christ, not through us, but through Christ, to defeat these strongholds. But that requires two things. A, it requires faith and prayer, and B, it requires moving. It requires action. You can't just pray, right? You got to pray first, then you got to move in faith. And I think we have too many people that get this out of order, right? And they think it doesn't work. Either they pray and they never move, and then they don't see God move, and they go, this thing doesn't work. Or they get it backwards and they try to conquer the world, or they're trying to conquer the world just by the voting box. Like, if we just vote this letter, then they're going to cure things for us. No. Right? So we can't, it takes both. Right? It takes action after the prayer. Like James said. Right? I'll show you my works I'll show you my faith by my works.
Yes, sir.
Right. Okay, 23.
Whoever guards his mouth and tongue keeps his soul from troubles.
Okay. I underlined this last word in the Matthew Henry commentary. I think this would be good for us to write on our mirror and lipstick. That's what my wife does, right? So, keep thy heart, and that will keep thy tongue from sin. Keep the tongue, and that will keep the heart from trouble. Okay? Did y'all catch that?
Mm-hmm.
So it all starts at the heart. If you protect your heart, then your tongue won't. So if you have bad things coming out of your tongue, it's not a tongue problem, it's a heart problem. But then this goes forward is once you speak those things, they're gonna have consequences. Understand that Scripture is clear, we're gonna have to give an account for every word that went out of our mouth. So if you're speaking positive things, then positive things are going to occur. Now, I'm not Pollyanna on this. Don't think, you're just gonna speak into existence a new car or something, but you're going to make your life much worse if you're speaking negative. First off, it's a spiritual battle. So when you're speaking negative, you're making agreements in the spiritual realm that is going to continue to give the enemy authority over you in areas of your life, right? And if you're speaking positively and you're speaking it out, then your actions will start mirroring your language and it will start bearing fruit. But you have to plow the ground, you have to wait. There's a reason he said the kingdom is like a mustard seed, right? So we all think, the kingdom, the kingdom is now, the kingdom is at hand. Well, the kingdom was that small, right? But the kingdom is going to grow and grow and grow, and of its end, there's no righteousness. But we've got to be patient. We got to do the right things. We got to grow the kingdom in our life and then outward in our community, in our church, in concentric rings. The most authority you have is right in your home, right? When you pray over, if you're like me, you bless your home, you pray over the doors, you watch what comes in. That's where you have the most authority, and then it goes out. But even like if you get into a situation where it's not your home, it's work or something, and you're dealing with someone that's evil, like we've talked about, you can pray that those demonic spirits don't manifest in front of you because you have the authority, right? You have the authority. They have free will. You can't, cast them out or do anything like that unless they agree. But if they're around you, they don't have to dominate you. Does that make sense? You have the power, but it takes faith and it takes recognition instead of just letting yourself be trampled. Okay. I think we better call it there because we're out of time. So next week, I guess Salvatore has been kind enough to fill in for me next week because I'm going to be out of town. So please support him. Thank y'all. JD, you want to pray us out?